Call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. On paper?
Yes. Okay, we'll start. We're gonna go through our minutes from the April meeting. Give everybody a chance to go through them. If any board members has any corrections or,
Yeah, I have one correction here.
Okay.
Under new business, local law 003 of 2023 places a public service overlay, not a commercial overlay.
That escaped me. Okay, got it.
might be,
Just in time for the phone.
oh, you should have been here for the last one. It was more fun.
This one is gonna be.
One correction I had.
Good Lord, I write all this. Okay. That's one correction.
Well,
Is everybody in?
it's, one thing real quick, Mary, on
Yep.
the guest list,
Yeah.
Net Flight and the fire chief were also here as guests, not just
Oh,
Mr.
okay.
Flight.
You said by the Mercy Flight representative was here, the fire chief was here, but
Net Flight had
that flight was here too,
represent-
okay.
yes.
Okay.
I move to accept the minutes with the changes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. So we'll get on to new business. Before we get on to the new business, I just wanted to take a second to rehash of what, the reason why this is here tonight in front of the board, the steps that our zoning allows us to look at, the criteria that this project has to meet, and just address some of the, we had a bunch of inconsistencies out there that we're trying to clear up. And I'm gonna give you a short synopsis of what got us to this point tonight. So we were notified in the February, March meeting that the fire company had been approached by an outside entity on putting a helicopter terminal base with housing on the fire company property. That time, we did not receive any official documentation such as a building permit or anything like that on the project to go forward. We just had a discussion on what criteria they would have to meet and what documentation we would require if they decided to go forward with the project. We are also currently working, both boards made up of the volunteers are working on redoing the zoning in the town of Western. And in part of that change in the zoning, certain uses that are in the town were gonna be corrected. And one of those was, we have for a public service entity, because the fire department would technically, if it was going in today, would be considered not unconditional use. So it was brought up that the zoning would be changed here in a matter of months anyways, if we adopt the new zoning that's coming through, and that parcel would have a different, conditional use, a different, I don't know what Carl, what word am I trying to?
Yeah, and we've also, within the new law, there would be a similar public service usage established as a use within the new zone.
And that pertains to that parcel only. So some confusion started with this commercial overlay. One of the tools Tug Hill gave us when we were redoing the zoning is the use of more of using the overlays as a better way of controlling projects that are going on in the town, to encourage development, but also have more control over the development. And that commercial zone, right now on draft, is scheduled to go from Dixon Drive to basically Metzler Hill. And it would be 600 feet off the center line of 46 is what we were looking at. And there would be another one going from the bridge over the Mohawk all the way to Stokes, along Stokes-Westenboro Road to the town line. So that's where the overlay came in. So at no point was there no parcels where, this is an overlay which affects many parcels. No one individual parcel would benefit from the commercial zone more than another one. The only other thing, like I said, the firehouse would become a public service. So, with that being said, the planning board and zoning board recommended to the town board to just make that parcel that the fire company sits on a public service conditional use now, instead of waiting for the drafts to come out. So that is where, that's where we are now. The current zoning, since the project is in front of us now, we're not using that draft zoning to make any determination on this project, is in the land conservation district. So that project, instead of going to the ZBA right away, goes to the land conservation, goes to the planning board because it's in that LC district. So tonight, last week, we finally got some paperwork. We have their building permit. You can see in front of the board members, we have maps, we have descriptions of the buildings they're putting up. We have a background of what they're proposing to doing, and we have their seeker form. And the seeker form is a state environmental quality review act that every project has to have done. Right now, we're considering that there's this type 1, type 2, and an unlisted action, and this one will be under the unlisted action seeker. So, in a minute, I'm gonna let the project, the fire company and their representatives submit their proposal, what they're doing, and what we have all the paperwork in front of us. We on the board are gonna be looking through what, in our zoning, what they require. Part of that is we're gonna be their off-street parking, any signs they're gonna use, the setbacks, the ingress and egress from the property. Is there gonna be any screening? Is there gonna be any plantings? We will also submit a copy of this to the United County Planning Department. Going through that in further detail is the need for the proposed project, the extent that it matches into what is around it, the existing character of the neighborhood, the location of the principal buildings, which is what the survey will entice. We gotta bring up traffic. Shouldn't be any problem with traffic with this project. We also get into the storm, sanitary, solid waste disposal, and any other utilities that could be on the site or adjacent to the site. the other thing is, does this plan is gonna make any other provisions for service demands such as water, sewer, fire, etc. And then we also are gonna look at any light effect, any air, or any the visual enjoyment that's gonna be on the parcel. So, that being said, after we go through that, the way our law is proposed, the planning board can either give a conditional yes, that they can go forward, or they can deny the permit. But even if we did go forward tonight, the permit cannot be issued until the town board has had a chance to consider it at their meeting. Also, the ZBA will come in and have to look at it, to any conditions that the planning board may put on the project. The ZBA would also have their say on the enforcement of those conditions. A copy of this plan can go forward to the United County Planning Department. They have 7 days to look at it, to give their feedback. So, that's basically how the process lays out. With that being said, Mike, if the representatives or Air Methods or whoever would like to stand up.
Okay, to stand here.
Yes.
Evening, Travis Mitchell with the Environmental Design Partnership, working on behalf of the fire department to prepare the necessary documents for the board. As the chairman indicated, we submitted last week a site plan with details of the proposal. We submitted a narrative that walks through some of the points in your code. We submitted a seeker short form, and we submitted a sample of the building plans. If you'd like, I can just walk through the plan quickly and then go through that narrative. The proposal, and you've got the drawings in front of you.
Yes.
This is the best place to stand, but tight
Yeah,
corners here.
basically.
Yep, okay, so you've got the existing firehouse here with the parking lot in front, right? This is the ball field, which I hadn't realized before tonight. I guess this was formerly a portion of that fire department property, which was then donated to the town to be used for recreational area. Just an interesting point. And there's an existing entryway here on the far eastern edge of the fire department property, which comes back now to an existing storage facility back here. So the proposal is to place what's effectively a crew quarters. It would be a 27 by 56 modular style unit here. There'd be 3 bedrooms, 2 baths in there. Where it would be staffed 24/7 with the crew members of the emergency squad, and then you'd have a 50 by 60 pre-engineered metal building which would house the aircraft. You've got a landing pad out in front here, enclosed with a fence, and some gravel parking, enough for 3 or 4 vehicles there. I think we listed 5. There's also an ADA accessible parking space with an ADA accessible bathroom in the storage facility. This would have its own electric service brought in off the street. It would have its own dedicated septic system. The design is put forth before you in the drawings. It would have its own dedicated drinking water well. Lighting, I'll touch on in the narrative, but lighting on the facility is pretty simple. It's 4 LED wall packs, 2 on each building, and then there's red LED navigation lighting on the fence posts. We included, just for some screening purposes, on the southwestern boundary line against the ball field, a 4-foot high fence with slats, just to define the area between the ball field and this facility. It sits over 500 feet to the nearest structure off of Route 46. It sits about 215 feet off of the ball field, and pushed right back to the rear of the property. We're just at the rear line setback on the back line. the questions on the plan, anyone, before I just kind of move on to the narrative?
To go through the parking again.
Sure.
Just a case scenario, right? There's an accident and it's deemed that the victim, the patient is going to be airlifted. An ambulance, whatever, brings them in to that parking zone. Where do they get loaded?
Right.
And
Yep.
notoriously, the firemen go out and there's 5 trucks or there's 20 trucks.
Yeah, so Bill can speak to
So
this,
how
but
do you-
in general, if the helicopter would be responding to emergencies from the outside, but on occasion, a patient is brought in to the location. It's typically, there may be a police escort, but it's typically an ambulance that comes in. There's a gravel parking lot in front of the building that's right up to an ADA accessible hard paved surface out onto the landing pad where a stretcher could be rolled and maneuvered out there to load the helicopter from, if that makes sense. So you wouldn't have a fire truck coming in that particular facility.
There's
You'd
not
have
gonna
an
be a horde of
ambulance.
20 vehicles coming in and,
No, sir.
is that what you're doing? Now, where would they come from? The fire department parking lot? Or is there going to be it's totally separate?
The access,
Which is where the access
road
road
board
is.
is
Where the-
where it is.
Yes.
Is there going to be any kind of, I'll say, 'cause obviously you don't know, but most people here, I live right across the road from this thing. People come fast around that corner. So if there's an emergency, is there going to be any kind of a red or yellow blinking light or anything on that corner to alert people coming from either direction?
So the
Because
most,
they come fast, and you can ask any of the firemen,
So-
people are in la-la land.
so the typical emergency does not involve moving the vehicles in and out of the entrance. The typical emergency involves the crew that's stationed in the facility there, making their way out into the landing pad to load the helicopter and leave. So Bill can provide the statistics, but on the rare occasion, a patient would come in through that entrance and then load the helicopter, and then they're leaving, the exit is not an emergency fashion, if you will.
Right. For future use, we might consider something like that, because you guys know, pulling out of that driveway, there's cars coming, and they don't care, either way.
No,
So with this project, you are going to have, how much traffic coming in on a?
If I could,
on a-
yeah, if you
Just
don't
saying,
mind,
we're not open to the public right now,
and if
so.
you, I'll probably answer that if I can
Here's-
just.
this gentleman should be in the back of the room.
If you don't mind, let me just finish going through the rest of the discussion and then,
I did have one question. How far back from Route 46 is the facility? Do you know?
just over 500
Just
feet.
over 500 feet, thank you.
And so we put together just some background information for the board, just on some basic facts and also compliance with zoning. So I'll just quickly, I'm not gonna go through all the details, there's 4 pages here. We'll just go through some of the highlights. Just in terms of the funding of this is funded by Air Methods, by the company proposing to put this facility in. It's at no cost to the fire department. They'll be paying the fire department a monthly lease to actually be there. I went through the facilities, as far as the 2 different buildings and the helicopter pad. Staffing of the facility, so this is typically staffed by three staff, 24 hours a day in rotating shifts. So there's a question about traffic. Between those shifts, there'll be 3 vehicles, typically 3 vehicles coming in, 3 vehicles leaving, either 8, 12, or on 24-hour shifts. So I think it's actually typically 12 or 24. So a couple times a day, you've got 3 in, 3 out. Snow removal, as far as the snow removal goes, the lease with the fire department requires that Air Methods provide any snow removal, anything that they need at the facility. Fueling of the equipment is provided through a fuel truck. They're not proposing at this time on-site storage of fuel. If it was proposed in the future, there's bulk storage petroleum requirements that have to be met, and you know, we do that all the time. It's not that big a deal, we have to go through the state permitting for that. There's no de-icing on these type of facilities, no de-icing chemicals with these. I talked about the lighting, it's pretty minimal on the facility. We included in this proposal an approach and departure plan so that you can get a feel for the route, and it's to the north and northwest of the facility, so out away from 46 and away from the recreation facility. Let's see.
I have one other question. You mentioned fuel truck. Is that going to be locally sited, or is that going to come in to fuel up?
No, so it basically, it would be stationed there and then go out to fuel, and then be stationed there to fuel. So it's not,
It'll be
it's
parked
not
in a
that's
storage
right,
facility.
it'll be parked there. It's not an in and out.
Right.
Yeah. Of course, would comply with any and all FAA requirements. I submitted the seeker form, we agree it's an unlisted action, planning board would be the lead agency. I then went through the zoning ordinance includes 11 points, which are specific to plan development districts or the land conservation overlay. So we went through, I don't know that it's necessary to go through those now, but we went through the 11 points and made mention of how the proposal complies with those points. Questions? Discussion?
At this point, how often do you anticipate that the helicopter would be taking off, or an emergency ambulance would come in to the facility?
So I'll defer to Mr. Stuba from Air Methods on that.
Using an average of 2 times per day?
Excuse me?
Using an average of 2 times per day?
Oh, okay.
Of the helicopter.
Of the
in and out,
helicopter
and then
taking off.
Correct.
How often would an ambulance typically bring a patient in?
From the fire department, slim to none,
Okay.
as far as EMS rendezvous.
As far as Mickey's concerned, it won't move his curtains now, it's further out.
For you, Phil, I don't have any curtains.
Could you
This is short, but this is primarily the secondary.
Okay.
Yeah, and so there's the existing building, that's the storage building, ball fields over here, so they come in from the north.
Okay, thank you.
Could you share that with us?
Literally, it's a home run, he's not gonna hit the bill.
He'll have to be pretty good at building. The existing firehouse is here, ball field is here, so it's to the north and northwest, the primary access approach.
You got one going over right now. You can hear that?
Yeah, the Army flies in and out of groups all the time.
Mike, do you wanna talk about the decibel levels?
We did some studies on that, the decibel levels for, talking to Bill, the helicopter's like 80 decibels, our siren is 118.
How many, Mike, how many?
118.
118, okay.
For the siren.
For the siren, okay.
And for everybody else's information, I don't wake up for the siren, so I'm not gonna wake up.
I don't hear it anymore.
Don't hear it.
The dogs used to hear it. Even they don't hear it.
Wake up all damn day.
That's the secret. Oh, I haven't seen that.
I know this question has been informally asked, but I want to do it so that everybody can hear in the public. What happens when your company decides they no longer want to lease the facility? What happens with the existing facilities that are built?
The way that the lease is written with the landlord, the crew quarters would be dismantled and the land would be returned to a graded surface. And then the hangar obviously would be offered to the fire department to acquire,
Okay, if they say no, do you remove that as well?
if we had to,
Okay.
To acquire as in purchase or donated?
acquire as in purchase. Correct.
See, I haven't seen the building permit thing either.
But
Yeah, I usually get a copy of it from the zoning officer. Oh, thank you.
Would you like me to go through those 11 points in detail, or I can?
I think you should, you know.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good
it might
idea
help.
if we just
Certainly,
walk through each one.
So the
Talking
zone,
on the zoning or the secret one?
I'll do seeker also if you'd like. Right now I'm talking zoning. So this is the town zoning ordinance for a project in the land conservation overlay. Talks about 11 points. So the point number 1 is the need for the project. And so, and I mentioned in here that Air Methods is actually already operating a helicopter starting at the end of March in Watertown temporarily that will be relocated to this facility. And just to speak to the need, since opening that base on March 28th, they've received 59 requests for help in the first 40 days of operation. So more than a request a day. I don't think there's a debate on the need. Point number 2, in what respects does the plan is or is not consistent with the stated purpose of the planned development district? So the code is a little bit confusing because it really serves 2 purposes in this instance. It's for projects in a planned development district in which you're requesting a zoning change, and the land conservation overlay. So we aren't proposing a planned development district. And as far as the land conservation district overlay, the intention there was to protect resources in and around the lake, steep slopes, things like that. We're certainly not on a steep slope. It's a flat parcel of land. We're above floodplain. We're outside wetlands. There's no tree clearing proposed. So I think it's a reasonably good use for that parcel. The extent to which the plan departs from zoning regulations formally applicable to the property in question, including not limited to both density and permitted uses, we're compliant with all the underlying zoning requirements. That doesn't apply. Existing character of the neighborhood and relationship beneficial or adverse to the proposed development to the neighborhood. The development provides the benefit of enhanced emergency services response and expanded capabilities to your local fire department. So I think it's certainly a good argument for the project. Location of principal and accessory building on the site in relation to one another and to other structures. We provided that, and I've been over it in the discussion. Provisions for pedestrian circulation, open space, blah, blah, blah. This is not a planned development district, so there is no need for open space or pedestrian circulation. Doesn't apply. Traffic circulation features of the site, amount and location of access. I mentioned it's on the existing access point, existing curb cut onto Route 46. Provided a minimum of 5 parking spaces, and I went over the trip generation. That has to do with the amount of traffic. It's 3 staff leaving, 3 staff entering, using the existing curb cut, provisions for storm, sanitary, solid waste. I mentioned that in the discussion. We are constructing a new septic system, new drinking well separate from the fire department. Stormwater would comply with the state requirements through the speedy permit. It's less than an acre disturbance will comply with all the erosion and sediment control requirements. The location type and size of signage, there is no signage out near the street. Each of the 2 buildings will have a small 12 by 24 just identification placard on the building themselves. I mentioned in here it's more than 500 feet away from the public right-of-way. And the last point, the physical design of the plan and manner in which said design does or does not make adequate provision for service demands, water, sewer, fire, provide adequate control of vehicular traffic, further amenities, light, air, visual enjoyment. I think, as we mentioned in here, by its very nature, it enhances the emergency services response. We don't impact town water or sewer demands, providing our own facilities on site. And I think with minimal lighting, minimal impacts on other environmental factors. Questions on that narrative?
No, just go through the seeker.
Okay, want me to go through seeker?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is a seeker state environmental quality review act. So So anytime a board takes takes a vote on any project, they need to go through secret. And this is, there's certain categories of projects that fall under different secret categories. Larger projects require a harder look, if you will, at the environmental factors. I think this one, there are certain thresholds, such as more than 10 acres of clearing, more than 200 cars, things like that, that cause a project to be what would be a type 1 action. This is pretty clearly an unlisted action, which means that the proper form is what's called a short form, about a 4-page form. You have it in front of you. To start this form, we go to the state database and initiate the application, and a number of the threshold questions come back answered from the state, along with the last page, which provides their summary of answers. So it talks about the basic facility. You want me to go through point by point?
I think we got, if you don't,
Somebody's gonna wish we did.
yeah,
No, that's fine.
we'll go through.
So we list the name of the facility, the applicant is the fire department, a summary of the proposal, the size of the building, the individual water and wastewater disposal, fuel storage, all that is spelled out in I've already been over it, don't need to say it again, in the description of the action. And then there are a number of questions. Does the proposed action involve the legislation adoption of a plan, local law, ordinance, administrative rule, or regulation? No. Does the proposed action require a permit, approval, or funding from another governmental agency? No. Total acreage of the proposed action, it's about a 9.5 acre parcel, 10 acres or so. The area to be physically disturbed, the buildings and the small parking expansion, is about 1/3 of an acre. The land uses that occur on or adjoining would be rural, parkland next door, commercial and residential. Is the proposed action a permitted use under zoning regulations? Yes. Consistent with the adopted land use plan? Yes. Is the proposed action consistent with the predominant character of the existing built or natural landscape? Yes. Is the proposed action located in or does it adjoin a state critical environmental area? No. Will the proposed action result in a substantial increase in traffic above present levels? No. Are public transportation services available at or near the proposed action? No. Are any pedestrian accommodations or bicycle routes available at or near the proposed action? No. Does the proposed action meet or exceed state energy code requirements? Yes. Will the proposed action connect to existing public or private water supply? No. Will the proposed action connect to existing wastewater utilities? No. Does the proposed site contain or is it substantially contiguous to a building, archaeological site or district which is listed in the National or State Register of Historic Places that's been determined by the Commissioner of the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation to be eligible for listing in the State Register of Historic Places? Oh. Is the site or any portion of it located in or adjacent to an area designated as sensitive for archaeological sites on the New York State Historic Preservation Office Archaeological Site Inventory? No. Does any portion of the site or proposed action or lands adjoining the proposed action contain wetland or other water bodies regulated by state or federal agency? Yes, in adjoining lands. Would the proposed action physically alter or encroach into any existing wetland or water body? No. Last page. Identify the typical habitats that occur on or likely to be found at a project site. Shall all that apply? Agricultural grasslands and suburban. Does the site of the proposed action contain any species, animal, or associated habitats listed in the state or federal government as threatened or endangered? Yes, the bald eagle. Is the proposed site located in the 100-year floodplain? No. Will the proposed action create stormwater discharges from point or non-point sources? No. Does the proposed action include construction or other activities that result in the impoundment of water or other liquids? No. Has the site, the proposed action, or adjoining property been the location of an active or closed solid waste management facility? No. Has the site, the proposed action, or adjoining property been the subject of remediation, ongoing or completed for hazardous waste? No. Questions on any of
And then on
those
the back is it.
responses?
Just a comment so that everybody understands, what we just reviewed is what's called the short environmental assessment form. This is what's presented to the planning board so that we can evaluate and designate the type of program that this is. For those of you not familiar with the State Environmental Quality Review Act, there are 3 types of projects. Type 1 is one that could potentially have a major impact and could require a full review, a full environmental impact statement if necessary. Type 2 is an action that is designated as unlikely to have any impact on much of anything. What falls in the middle, and the state provides definitions of what falls under type 2 and under type 1. Those actions that do not fall under those actions are called unlisted. And in this particular case, the addition of the helicopter pad doesn't fall within type 1 or type 2, so it's likely to be adopted as an unlisted action. And also, as far as the seeker is concerned, some agency must be designated as the lead to do the full-up review of all of the documents that are presented. That will probably be the town planning board.
As far as the impact on the area, it's not much different than somebody putting a home and a garage in. It's pretty straightforward and simple.
Carl, does the town board have to designate the lead agency, or does,
We can, as the planning board, basically, say the town planning board will take action as the lead agency. And that would actually take place right on the environmental assessment form.
And like he touched on, the state database, once you put this parcel in, it comes up with that area, and that's what the state has, anything that they have listed for that area comes up there. That's not a judgment call on any of the parties, it is in the state database. Probably getting writing or something.
Yeah, and what will happen is, because a couple of things that you heard in here that were answered yes, is there is a potential impact on the nesting bald eagles, and the planning board will request a study to see whether or not that impact is significant or whether it can be mitigated. It also identified that the adjoining property of the old canal was at one time used as a solid waste disposal, and we would look to see if there's any potential cross impact between the 2 pieces of property. What ultimately has to be decided is the depth of the SEQA review process, which results from this form.
Carl, can we have questions?
It's up to the chairman.
Yeah, we'll have it's a public meeting, which technically does not have to open up the public comment. But when we get done with our business here, I will set aside a little bit of time for public comment, seeing that we have a couple people tonight, so right now, yeah. But it's something that we're just offering as a courtesy. If it was a public hearing, we would have to.
We'll do that prior to the vote.
Yeah, we just gotta set it.
How much lighting is gonna be on there?
What's that?
It's a dirt road, it's a
The
dirt
dirt
road.
road,
Yeah.
dirt road is there, how much lighting is going to be put there? Is there going to be lighting put there? There's not going to be
No,
any.
nothing
The
along the
only
dirt road.
lighting
Not along the
would,
dirt road.
just those, the wall packs on the 2 buildings.
Okay.
Just lighting over here.
Yeah, there's no tall stadium lighting or anything like that going in, it's only gonna be building.
Just on the buildings itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would write up something just that's stating the fact that, that the dwelling has to be removed.
We can make that a condition of the use permit.
Sure. And make it a condition of approval.
That way there's no questions later on if it was.
In fact, we as the planning board would make that recommendation to the ZBA, And then when we actually hold our hearing for the approval of the conditional use permit, we would then impose that as one of the conditions.
No, so the ZBA handle the
Yes.
question of that.
We would identify our concerns, but then the ZBA would impose them.
Does any other,
Just to clarify that to the public, the planning board's job here is to review the proposed installation, determine whether or not it meets the conditions for installation within a land conservation zone, make some recommendations as to conditions that have to be imposed on it, pass that on to the zoning board of appeals. The zoning board of appeals will then meet and consider whether or not the applicant should be granted a conditional use permit, which is what's covered under the current zoning with the new amendment to the law. And we have the right to impose conditions on the permit that must be met when they bring the facility in and actually do that. So it's a twofold thing, recommendations from the planning board, imposition by the zoning board.
and town board would also have.
The town, yeah,
Consideration.
just one of the considerations here for any of these recommendations, the town board has the right to review any actions the planning board takes, and they can either consent to it, or by what's called a supermajority vote, in other words, they have to have a 75% majority vote, can reject what the planning board recommends. So they have that right to do that. Once the zoning board appeals the conditional use permit, that goes away.
Yeah, and the permit cannot be issued until.
Yeah, the actual building permit cannot be issued until the town board rules on it.
Does any member have any other questions that we'd like to discuss? You got the lighting, the traffic is pretty
Yeah,
standard.
yeah, the lighting, the traffic, yeah.
Setback,
No, longer than anything.
we're 216 feet off of the fence of the soccer field. So,
When you talk about traffic,
yes,
you're talking about automobiles and motor vehicles.
Right.
correct.
And I've missed some of the meeting
Yeah.
tonight, so if I ask redundant questions, just tell me. What about the traffic in the air? I may have missed something. Do we know how often that they run test flights and things of that sort? Or they only fly when they're going for some emergency?
Only, I don't, that,
Yeah, so I think, Bill had suggested it's on average twice a day, in and out, and there may be an occasional, there's not a daily test flight per se, but there may be an occasional operation of the helicopter, let's say if it's been down for, 4 days without a flight, and, they may take it around, as an exercise, routine, but it isn't a daily exercise. If that
So
makes
when you
sense.
say twice a day is, that's what they anticipate the need for it? Or
That's
is that
right.
what they, twice a day they fly no matter what, just to
No,
keep it open?
no, just on average, the expected call in and out is twice a day. And what I'm saying is if, let's say they don't get a call for 3 or 4 days, they may take the helicopter up to exercise it, once a day, once during that period of 3 or 4 days.
I'm assuming there are people here who are concerned about additional flights overhead. We've already got the base, so that's why I wanted to ask those questions.
Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
There's a beacon on the helicopter that automatically corresponds to.
Yes, so, there's all kinds of different airspace regulations, right, it's the FAA. And so these operations typically have a dedicated, what's called squawk code, meaning that aircraft has its own unique identifier, and as soon as they're in the air, they're on with Griffiths, they're on with Syracuse, they are communicating with the air traffic control, basically.
Because I don't know how the process goes when you cite a location, but the FFA, have you got in touch with them? Are they happy where?
There's no need.
Okay.
We currently operate in this airspace as it is right now.
So there's no concern about where you're located, popping up on, so as soon as as soon as you're in the air, that. the squawk
Application's
box
gone
goes
into the
off.
FAA for the discrete squawk code, and at the present time, the aircraft all in the state currently operate in and out of this area.
At this time, we'll take a couple minutes, or a little bit, if anybody from the audience has any questions. We'll just
What percent?
Just stand up, sir, and just please state your name.
I'm Carl Hafner.
Yep.
I'm fairly unique in my knowledge set. I practice aviation medicine. I'm a pilot, plane owner. I live down the street.
Can you speak a little louder, sir?
And I do have concerns about this. I believe where you're putting your pad is down by the river. So that's gonna be near a tree line. No?
It's on the fire department property.
Right, but it's down toward the river.
No.
No? Okay,
It's
good.
on, it's on the canal.
Are on the canal, but there's a tree line there. Am I correct?
No, it's not on the canal.
There is.
There is.
There's a tree line.
Considering our winds and everything, that can make landing a little probable at times. I'm not used to having airports or helipads put next to playgrounds. I presume most of your flights are going to be IFR, am I correct?
That's incorrect.
You're gonna be doing a VFR?
That's incorrect. Both Mercy Flight Central and the majority, all but 2 of our aircraft operate under VFR regulations. Our aircraft in Watertown is an IFR rotor wing, and our aircraft in Sayre, Pennsylvania is a rotor wing.
Okay, that wasn't my
operates under
question.
IFR.
What percentage of your flights are IFR?
A very small percentage. Out of the hundreds per month, on a handful, less than
In the
10.
wintertime?
Wintertime, 0, of course, you know that in this
Zero
area.
or what? IFR or VFR?
0 IFR in the wintertime, and that's a given in this area from probably November through April because of icing levels and conditions that you're very familiar with.
Okay, could you tell us what
IFR is instrument flight rules.
RFR and all that stuff?
IFR is instrument flight rules, so I mean, basically when the weather is bad enough that you can't visually see, VFR is visual flight rules.
Yeah, you got it 3 miles or
RFR, and
whatever,
then the other
1
one is, what
mile.
did you say,
Visual.
I think a lot of the town has the feeling this is gonna be very beneficial to them. The way the EMS system is set up is that you don't call for a medevac, you call for an ambulance, paramedic, and EMT. There's a sequence that has to go through before you get there. And because of our locations to 2 hospitals, one of them is a trauma center, we don't here stand to benefit from this. Because you're gonna have an ambulance on site, which is gonna stabilize somebody. If they have concerns, they would call for the helicopter, a medevac. That medevac has to get pre-flighted, may only take a couple minutes. They're gonna have to file most likely a flight plan. He may disagree on that. They're gonna have to get there. By the time you do all of that, that ambulance could be at a hospital already. So for where we are,
You kidding me?
Disagree.
You can get to Syracuse, but
I disagree 100%.
oh,
We all
being an
disagree.
emergency
I don't care,
medicine,
I don't care what you
guaranteed.
think. I don't care what.
One at a time, please.
Okay.
It's not in our zoning regulations on the stuff like that.
I realize, I'm just stating it out there so that people have a better understanding of things. And a good question to ask is how many medevac flights have actually occurred in our area?
A lot of
No,
them.
no, for our own.
We have
We-
logging, we have all sorts of issues, snowmobiles.
But that's not in town.
My guys got airlifted to Syracuse. Mike will be there to testify that there was no way that guy could have made it to Syracuse faster than a car or a helicopter.
He may not have gotten there
Well, what's the point?
faster, but he wouldn't have gotten there earlier. That's my point.
Earlier.
For the last month, there's been 3 flights that were denied because there wasn't a copter available for them, right, pretty close to this area, so.
Statistically, less than 50% of medevacs are needed.
All you need is one. All you need is one.
Good, you pay the 40 grand.
If that saved my child, my father, my wife, my kid, it's worth it. You put on one life. You put $1 million on that life, you put $2 million on it. It takes one.
That's not.
Life is not.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, can we just, we're gonna address this one person at a time. Gentleman has a right to offer his opinion and his information. We'll get on with the next one.
Is this for me?
Please state your name.
My name
Hi.
is, I'm sorry, I
I'm
thought you were talking to me.
Said man.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Martin. I live right up here on River Road on the corner of Quaker, down a little bit. My question is, I'm not familiar with aircraft, okay? So I understand that the pad will have a gate around the pad, and then there's gonna be a 4-foot fence around the ball field area. Am I correct?
So there's already a fence around the ball field area. There's just a supplemental fence with visual slats on it, just to provide a little bit of screening beyond the fence that's already there, in front of this facility.
Okay, so now not being familiar with aircraft, and I'm saying this from movies, okay? When a helicopter takes off, you see the guy, you see him bent down, okay? And you see him hop into the blades, the rotors are going, and you see stuff flying. Okay, is this gonna be an issue? I mean, is it possible that rocks, sticks, fallen branches from storms that aren't picked up, or will they be picked up? I mean, these are all just questions that I have.
Yeah. So the pad itself is surrounded by a fence, and the rotor wash outside the actual landing location wouldn't extend beyond the kind of the immediate area of this facility. So I think we said it's 216 feet to the ball field fence, and there is no rotor wash impact anywhere.
So there would be no possible way that anything can blow onto the ball field or the park or a home.
Right, and the flight path that I showed is intentionally set up away from 46, away from the ball field.
One's gonna go right over my house.
Out to the north.
You know, which, that isn't a concern for me so much as the ball field, the park, or if there's children. I go there all the time. You know, I'm at the park, I'm weeding sometimes. Sometimes I found cash or change that I'd like to donate back to, it's only a few dollars right now, but back to the town to fix things if we need, or plant flowers. But that was just my major concern, not being familiar with aviation or the aircraft itself. But thank you for hearing my question.
Anybody else have a question?
Jeff Striford, I live on Kirk Road, just a little up north from here. Great points that this gentleman brought up, things I didn't think of, and it was a great presentation. Bottom line is what Mickey Wilbert said. To me, it's always gonna be about life. And I support this, I don't care if it's noisy or not.
John, did you have your hand up?
Yes. I have just three basic points. One, to touch on what Carl had mentioned about the need for that, and your comment too as well, that how much is a life worth? And I know that's one of your greatest concerns, is saving lives. I think if you extend that out, you reach a financial number, not on what a life is worth, but what it costs to try to save lives. And if we go off the simple premise that it's priceless, a life is priceless, then why not have a helicopter in every village, in every town, a pad, a functioning process like this where everybody has an opportunity to have their lives saved. And bar the costs aren't an issue, but they will be at some point in time. First point. Second point is, you'd mentioned that Tug Hill, I guess that's someone who gives you the authority to make certain zoning regulations or something like that. What is that?
They provide a survey.
They're a non-government
They're a
body.
service organization primarily composed of governments, basically from Oneida County.
Okay, all right, so they gave you, I guess, the idea or the possibility of doing an overlay that would help. Well, that's what we understood, or I understood, I'm sorry.
We've had overlays in our book before. You could expand overlays to include more than just land conservation, so we're looking at
Okay, so my
commercial.
point then is, if you can apply an overlay to anyone, or any parcel, let's say, is it a parcel based?
No, that's not what an overlay does.
Okay, so it's not partial based.
It can be, but generally
Yeah.
not.
Okay. So if you can change the zoning for a certain area, based on, a private party's request, there are actually two private parties. There's LifeNet and there's the fire department. These are two private parties. One happens to be a parcel owner. So if you're doing all of this for private parties, why couldn't you do something like this for Mr. Petrosky today instead of making him leave and come back?
It's got nothing to do with it.
It has nothing to do with it. It is, but I'm simply saying, it is two private parties and a private party who wants to do something. And looks like you're showing favoritism to these private parties and not helping out Mr. Petrosky. And I think that's that's bad for the town, because if somebody wants to come in here and do something in the future.
You're not stating the correct facts.
So, I'm sorry.
You
Let me
don't
just-
know all the particulars.
Let me-
Move on to your third
Yeah.
point and drop this one right here.
Well, I don't have to. I mean, you could tell me to, but I don't have to. But I'll go on to the third point. And the third point is, the third point is that I really don't think that you need to be disrupting an existing zoning for the town park by changing the zoning on a neighboring parcel. And I believe if you look at that, I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can disrupt an existing zoning for a parcel for something else. I think it's against the law, basically. You can't push somebody out of business by changing the zoning. But that's up to you. I'm not an attorney.
Let me clarify what has happened here. When this came in, we said, well, there's no provision within the current zoning for something like public service. But we do have a land conservation overlay that has existed for quite a while that provides the planning board the authority to look at potential uses within that overlay. And it's there because it's something of concern. The change that was made was not to zoning. Okay, the fire department sits within the residential agricultural zone. That has not changed. The only thing that has changed was to amend the law to add a public service overlay, which can be applied wherever the planning board thinks is appropriate. It is not a change of zoning.
Okay,
Okay?
so then.
We are not changing zoning to accommodate these people or the fire department.
Okay, I agree, and there was some miscommunication,
Right.
because we
Yeah.
had the planning board chairman say at the first meeting we were at on April 17th that there was an industrial commercial overlay applied to that area. So
That
we
was
were
my
concerned about that.
No, that was a misstatement.
No,
The-
that's why we corrected.
Yeah,
We corrected that.
the reason I corrected the minutes
Okay,
is it was not
so-
a commercial, it was a public
There
service
is a
overlay.
commercial zone that is located above that. That has
So
nothing to
my-
do with that.
right,
project.
So
so
at
my-
any rate, no, we did not, in other words, what you're referring to is what's called spot zoning, we did not do that. The zone has not changed. All we have done was create an overlay in which the planning board can look at a potential use that would not normally fall within that zone as to whether it's appropriate.
Right, and I'm just saying, why didn't you do that for
Right.
Mr. Petrosky?
Well, Mr. Petrosky has a totally different problem.
He may or may not be. He's a
He is
private
asking,
party.
he is asking to do something that is not permitted
Neither's a helicopter pad
within,
unless
he
he
is,
changes.
just let me finish. He is asking to do something that is not permitted within the zone, and there is no other overlay there that would allow that use within it.
Yeah, but because you created it.
Just let me finish.
Okay,
Okay, I didn't interrupt you.
you did, but go ahead.
The whole point of this was that Mr. Petrosky has to justify why he should be granted a use variance. In this case, the only thing the fire department will be granted is a conditional use permit. That is what was enabled by the amendment creating the public service zone. They are two totally different things.
Yeah, well, I think it stinks.
Well, you're entitled.
foul. That is my opinion. That is
But
my
a
opinion.
use variance is clearly established within state law, not just within our zoning
Okay.
ordinance.
I don't-
Zoning
I-
ordinance simply reflects
I
state
don't
law.
want to take up very much more time. I just want to say one more thing.
So, anyway.
I appreciate some of you folks, I know, I've grown to know, some of you folks are my neighbors. and I know you would do anything for me if I was hurt or I was in danger. And I think you would too. And I think you would too. In fact, you have. And I appreciate that very much. There's something about board members, when they get together, that concerns me. They change and they become a group that prevents us from watching these things via camera. They tell us we can't have a microphone over there.
This is not going
This
on
is,
anywheres
I'm,
with the
I
company.
need to leave.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
something going on, I have
Yeah,
to
Rita
leave.
has to go,
Hang on
another
one
meeting.
second.
I really
Yeah,
need to.
one last question. This gentleman right here, please state your name.
I'm Mark Hale from Whaley Road up on the hill. This is for LifeNet. Isn't it true you approach Nida County for hangar space and were denied before you approached the fire department?
We certainly did, and Oneida County stated there was no hangar space, and when we had further dialogue with them, they essentially told us that we were not wanted there because of their relationship with Mercy Flight Central, and probably not such a professional manner.
Didn't they also tell you that they would not dispatch you via 911?
That's a decision that they would make. I would tell you that probably that would be challenged if there was a bad outcome of a patient, that is not an accepted standard of practice across the entire country, sir.
And to answer his question, when, a life minutes matter, you got Mercy Flight, who's been here for how many years?
8 years.
And I'm sorry?
8 years.
8 years, and a helicopter to fly up here, matter of minutes. They're out there housed where it's safe, and the appropriate place on the airport. Just hear me out.
Right.
And this company was here before. They pulled up and left. So let's say they come in, okay, and disrupt things. Mercy Flight is a non-for-profit. These guys are a full for-profit. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you fly me and my insurance don't pay, you're gonna come after me for the extra money, correct?
Absolutely not. I'll actually go on record for the board, and I'll go on record for the WKTV camera. What you're saying is non-factual, and if I actually ask Ms. Reese to actually state the fact as well, I will tell you that it's a misunderstanding. That aircraft is not dedicated to Oneida County. Their aircraft will go wherever their dispatch center sends them. They could go to Ithaca right now. They could go to Ontario County right now. They're gonna go just like any of our aircraft would. So for you to think and for you to express to the constituents that that aircraft sits there and is dedicated to specifically this area is completely incorrect.
I didn't say it was dedicated. I never said that. I just said it's right down the
But hit
road.
the fact, we gotta make sure that people understand the facts. And the fact is, sir, that aircraft can get dispatched just like any of our aircraft, any place in the state at any point in time.
Right, and there's also a state police helicopter in Syracuse.
That's incorrect. The state
Back
police have not done medevacs in quite some time, sir. Their mission's been disbanded. The New York State Police has disbanded their medevac operations. They've disbanded the Syracuse operation, the Saranac Lake operation, et cetera. So
What
that's
happened in Lee?
not factual.
Mercy Flight had a lawsuit against them.
Really? What happened?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Didn't Mercy Flight have a lawsuit against the state police on the airline?
Oh, 20 years ago. He said Lee, right?
Yes, Lee.
What happened in the South Lee?
Is this detour forwarding the
All
conversation?
right,
No.
Okay, this is off topic.
Right now, public comments are closed.
Can I just say one thing real quick?
Go ahead.
This is Karen Grace from Mercy Flight Central.
Yeah.
I just wanted to remind everybody that we are here. We've been here since 2008, or for 8 years. We're committed to the community. As Bill said, obviously, we're here and we maybe sometimes respond to other areas, but we have done a deep dive on our data and we're not seeing the 3 requests that you stated that we weren't available for. I'm not really sure where some of this information is coming from, so I certainly would welcome some information on that, but we're available, we are here. Obviously, we may respond just the same as Air Methods may respond someplace else. But we're here, we plan to be here in the community, and we are about 5 miles away, so. 4 minutes by air. 4 minutes by air, and we certainly have services area and will continue to do so.
So if you guys are out, somebody else needs a helicopter,
Then we give it to the next closest airport. I mean, that's, we would.
it wouldn't be beneficial to have 2 of them?
It'd be beneficial to have 8.
Maybe we should have another fire department too.
Yeah, 2 of them, each side of town.
Why don't you sign up then, good enough?
Yeah. Oh, you don't have to be rude. We're not being rude.
You?
Well, but yeah,
Probably am.
I understand, but it's just, it's
keep
difficult.
quiet then.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
Well, let me, yeah, I just wanna make one other point here, and I'll ask Mike, right? or, yeah.
Bill.
You mentioned, I think, one other time when this first came up, what's your typical area of coverage?
A typical rotor wing in the United States covers 150 nautical mile radius. So
Okay,
all of ours overlap each other, and we also back each other up.
Yeah, so I think the reason I asked him that question is, we had a comment about this for the town, and I'm not sure whether that meant the hamlet of Westernville or whether the town of West. This isn't just about the town of Western. This is simply a company coming in and asking to lease fire department space to put in a facility that provides additional air ambulance service. Okay, this is not about, whether it conflicts with Mercy Flight, because I have a suspicion they will both have more than enough work, and they probably already do. And I'm not concerned whether one is for-profit or not-for-profit. As far as the planning board is concerned, that's irrelevant. Okay, we're not here to, to deal with competition or anything else. We're here to deal with land use, and whether or not, under our current zoning ordinance, this is an appropriate land use. And that ultimately will be the decision that the planning board's gonna make. So you need to understand what we're doing
It's
here.
not our decision whether it's a good idea or not. We are only here to decide if it meets the criteria.
Right.
That you changed, so that it would.
I need to call it, meetings are closed because I have to leave.
She has to leave, okay.
Right. So first, Mr. Chairman, I want to make a motion that we formally accept the environmental assessment form, and that we designate this as an unlisted seeker action.
Okay, you formally accept,
To formally accept the environmental assessment form from the fire department,
okay.
and that we designate this as an unlisted action under seeker.
I'll second that.
I'm still writing. Listed, seeker form, seeker actions. Okay,
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. So we'll become the lead agency, and finish up the seeker, so for now it's tabled. and
So the only thing that remains now is based on the information we applied for, we're gonna have to make a determination as to what level of seeker review we're gonna require. There were two actions in here, or two items in here. One is that we're located in an area with the bald eagles, and the other one is that we're located directly next to the old landfill. And the only action that we will have to do a review as to whether or not these are significant impacts. If they are there mitigations that can be taken to minimize those impacts? And that's something the planning board will do in conjunction with the applicants.
Anybody didn't have any further?
I just lost, what's happening with the Emma Hill?
oh yeah, the Elmer Hill condo
They're
project.
playing corn, so it can't be going too fast.
Yeah, nothing has showed up here yet.
Nothing came up on that?
Nothing has
Okay.
been talked about in the solar farm or the apartment buildings.
All right.
No information on that.
No information.
This matter is tabled, pending our outcome on the seeker form. And other than that, we have no other new business to attend to, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you for coming.
I was just gonna say, if you need anything from media from Air Methods or LifeNet, we're happy to send you anything from our marketing department. Okay. Is there anybody here? Okay. But we're happy to give you a quote or film if you come out and film anything. We're happy to help out. Okay. If you want to come to the meet, you're welcome to come. All right. All right. Thank you. No problem at all. Nice to meet you.
I gotta get it re-signed and I will. I'll wait till you read it. Yes. Specifically, what it has to say, we want to do this, or we want to do that. I think people.
Could you please dust off a little I spend more time on this than I ran Well, I got an electric tiller. I always like this. Oh, yeah. I bought it.
When? Tomorrow morning?
No, I got a few more and I bought seeds. What'd you buy? I bought pumpkin and squash and cucumbers and
That's all I gotta say. One person.
They're down the road.
Huh?
They're right down the road.
And they're in Albany picking somebody up, and we got somebody that falls off my barn roof and breaks their neck, and they need to go to Syracuse. They're not coming. They're coming. My brother's on the fire department. I know how it
People are in the
works.
ditch. And they find, oh yeah, they were just, they were just
21 years.
Right.
You know how many times I called for a chopper for a car accident? Twice.
How many did you need to?
You know how many got denied?
How many did you need to?
That's it. You know what I got told towards the end of my career? To go to the ambulance personnel, the professionals that they got there, and ask them, because our helicopter was flying too much for people that didn't need to get flown.
That's absolutely true. But that's beside the point. The point is, okay, I break my finger and I've got the right insurance, I can fly in the helicopter. That's wrong. I agree with that. But when I break my neck and I need that sucker, I want it there. And I live across the road and I'm gonna hear it and see it, and I don't give a shit, because it might be one of my kids, or it could be one of my neighbors. That's all I care. One person.
Number of incidents.
One person.
And like the lady said last time, we fly how many times a week for a week on average?
I don't care. You have a multiple car vehicle accident, multiple injuries. How many can you take? One. How many can they take? One. What if there's 5 people? The rest are tough shit. It's the way it works. It's the way it works.
Lightning can strike us here.
We had the tornado. Nobody got hurt. But all it's got to do is hit the high school. All right? Now what do we do? Now what do you do? You got Lake Delta. You got multiple drown victims that have been revived. Okay? But they need to be backed out. You can only take one. Am I correct? Okay. How long does it take you to get to Syracuse and back? And drop somebody off. All right? So number 2 is waiting 40 minutes. They're dead.
No, there's more aircraft. That's where we would have someone come from. Not 40, not, yeah, we wouldn't go.
Right across the street.
your team.
You're not going to change it. One person. That's all it takes. One.
None of us work together to get things done for the town and for the board. And you know, we are the planning board, we're not the zoning board.